The king's unexpected choice. The grand hall, usually a bastion of hushed reverence, buzzed with an almost palpable tension. Sunlight, fractured by stained glass windows depicting ancient Alpha lineage, painted shifting mosaics across the polished marble floor. Today was the day of the royal selection, the day King Torvin would choose his Luna. 100 expectant faces, ranging from the haughty confidence of seasoned noblewomen to the nervous excitement of younger, less experienced candidates, turned towards the raised dais where the king sat. Torvin, a figure of imposing stature even in repose, surveyed the assembly. His obsidian eyes, usually sharp and assessing, held an unreadable depth today. Beside him, his beta, Lord Cale, stood with his arms crossed, a picture of stoic duty. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfumes, nervous sweat, and the faint, earthy aroma of unshifted wolves, a potent cocktail of ambition and desire. The procession began, each eligible female presented with meticulous formality by a royal herald. Lady Isolde, from the formidable Stonefang pack, strode forward with the regal bearing of a queen already crowned. Her rich, auburn hair shimmered under the light, and her scent, a powerful blend of pine and assertiveness, filled the space. A ripple of approval went through the court. Lord Cale offered a subtle nod of acknowledgement, a rare gesture. Next came Lady Lyra, from the affluent Riverbend pack, whose delicate beauty belied a sharp intelligence rumoured to be as keen as any warrior's blade. Her scent was lighter, a fragrant mix of lilies and rain, but carried an underlying current of resilient strength. The whispered comments of admiration were almost audible. The choices were clear, the selections almost predetermined by centuries of tradition and power dynamics. The hours wore on, each presentation a carefully orchestrated display of lineage, wealth, and influence. Torvin listened, impassive, occasionally offering a brief, non-committal smile, his gaze never lingering. The court grew restless, the initial excitement giving way to a weary anticipation. Surely he would choose one of the obvious contenders. The future of the kingdom, after all, rested on a strong alliance. Then, the herald cleared his throat, a hint of confusion in his voice. And finally, Ilara, daughter of, well, no known lineage. A ripple of laughter, quickly stifled, spread through the hall. Ilara! The name itself sounded insignificant. From the back of the assembly, a figure emerged, small and almost swallowed by the grandeur of the surroundings. She was dressed in a simple, unadorned gown of dove grey, a stark contrast to the jewel-toned silks and velvets of the other candidates. Her hair, a muted brown, was pulled back in a simple braid, and her eyes, downcast, were obscured by long lashes. Her scent was barely perceptible, a faint whisper of wildflowers and old parchment, almost drowned out by the bolder fragrances around her. She looked utterly out of place, a field mouse among a pack of wolves. The snickers grew louder, less suppressed. Even some of the younger guards struggled to maintain their composure. Lord Cale's brow furrowed, a silent question forming on his lips. This was unprecedented. To present someone of no noble standing was an insult to the tradition. Ilara walked, shoulders hunched, her steps hesitant. She stopped before the dais, her gaze still fixed on the floor. She didn't curtsy with the practiced grace of the others, merely offered a slight, awkward bow of her head. Silence descended, heavy and expectant. Torvin rose from his throne. The movement was slow, deliberate, drawing every eye. He descended the 3 steps, his boots echoing softly on the marble. He stopped directly in front of Ilara. The height difference was stark, his imposing frame dwarfing her fragile one. He reached out, not to offer a hand, but to gently tilt her chin upwards with a single finger. Her eyes, revealed now, were a startling shade of amethyst, wide and filled with a profound shyness. But beneath the timidity, Torvin saw something else, a flicker of something ancient and untamed, like embers glowing in a deep forest. A collective gasp went through the hall as Torvin's voice, deep and resonant, cut through the silence. "I choose Elara." The words hung in the air, echoing the disbelief that now gripped every soul present. Laughter, louder and less restrained than before, erupted. It was a cacophony of incredulity, outrage, and derision. Lord Carl, for the first time in his long service, openly stared at his king, a look of utter bewilderment on his face. Lady Isolde's regal composure shattered, her face twisting into a mask of pure fury. Lady Lyra's carefully cultivated calm faltered, a flicker of shock in her usually serene eyes. "This is a jest!" Someone from the Stonefang contingent boomed, his voice thick with indignation. "He mocks us!" Torvin, however, remained unperturbed. He ignored the uproar, his gaze fixed solely on Elara. A small, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. He took her hand, his large fingers enveloping her small ones. "Welcome, Luna," he said, his voice carrying only to her. Elara's head snapped up, her eyes wide with a mixture of terror and disbelief. Her gaze swept over the mocking faces, the sneering expressions, the outright laughter. A flush crept up her neck, staining her cheeks a deep crimson. She tried to pull her hand away, but Torvin's grip, though gentle, was firm. He led her back towards the dais, the laughter and protests following them like a hostile wave. The Beta, regaining his composure, stepped forward, his expression grave. "Your Majesty, surely there is some misunderstanding," he began, his voice low, urgent. Torvin merely shook his head, a decisive gesture that brooked no argument. He helped Elara onto the plush seat beside his throne, a seat that had always remained empty, awaiting its Luna. She perched on the edge, small and lost, her amethyst eyes darting nervously around the room. The scent of her fear was now more pronounced, a fragile sweetness that clung to the air. The court, though still buzzing with outrage, slowly quieted, understanding dawning that the king was serious. This was no jest. This was his choice, and it was baffling, dangerous, and utterly unprecedented. "The full moon is in 3 days," Torvin announced, his voice now ringing with authority, silencing the last vestiges of dissent. "The formal presentation of the Luna will take place then." He looked at Elara, a curious glint in his obsidian eyes. She looked back, her expression a mixture of fear and a burgeoning, almost imperceptible spark of defiance. Her wolf, if she even had one, was entirely dormant, her scent the very definition of unshifted. The kingdom had chosen powerful, noble Lunas for centuries, women whose wolves were strong, formidable, and a credit to their pack. Torvin's choice was not merely unconventional, it was an act of profound, almost suicidal defiance of tradition. The court, for all its outrage, could only watch, captivated and appalled, as the new, unknown Luna sat beside their king, a silent question mark in the heart of the kingdom. What could possibly possess their alpha to make such a dangerous gamble? And what hidden depths lay within the shy girl, whose wolf remained a secret, a mystery that would soon be unveiled under the full moon's terrifying light? The air, once thick with ambition, was now heavy with foreboding. The king's unexpected choice had set the stage for something momentous, something that promised to reshape not just the court, but the very fabric of their world. Whispers and hiding. The whispers started before Elara even left the throne room, a venomous current that snaked through the opulent halls and seeped into every shadowed corner. "No lineage," one courtier hissed, her fan fluttering like a frantic moth. A commoner, chosen over House Alden's Lyra. It's an affront to the ancestors. Another scoffed. And her wolf, dormant, they say. The king has lost his senses. What kind of Luna has no voice? Elara, tucked away in a small antechamber with a trio of stern-faced maids, felt the weight of their judgment press down on her. Her hands trembled as the maids adjusted the delicate silk of her presentation gown, a garment that felt more like a cage than clothing. The fabric, a shimmering silver that caught the moonlight streaming through the tall, arched window, was meant to signify purity and grace. Instead, it felt like a spotlight, highlighting every flaw, every fear. "Hold still, Lady Elara," one maid chided, her fingers surprisingly gentle as she fastened a pearl clasp at Elara's nape. "The king expects perfection." Perfection! The word tasted like ash in Elara's mouth. She was anything but. Her stomach churned with a nauseous blend of terror and disbelief. How could this be happening? One moment, she was a quiet herbalist, living a life of predictable simplicity. The next, she was the chosen Luna, a role she felt utterly unqualified for. The thought of facing the entire court, of standing beside King Torvin, sent a fresh wave of panic through her. Her wolf, usually a comforting, albeit silent presence, felt unusually distant. A faint tremor beneath her skin rather than a roar. Meanwhile, in the king's private study, Torvin stood before a roaring fireplace, the flames reflecting in his obsidian eyes. Kyle, his beta, paced the rich rug, his usually stoic face etched with frustration. "Torvin, you cannot truly intend to go through with this," Kyle urged, his voice tight with barely contained fury. "The court is in an uproar. Lady Isolde's father is threatening to recall his regiments from the southern border. Lyra's house is boycotting the presentation. This is unprecedented, dangerous." Torvin turned, his expression unyielding. Dangerous, perhaps, but necessary. He picked up a heavy tome from his desk, its leather cover worn smooth with age. The prophecies speak of a Luna chosen not by blood, but by spirit. One who carries the ancient song within her, a song that will awaken the dormant heart of our lands. Kyle scoffed. "Prophecies? Since when do you put stock in old wives' tales, Torvin? We need a Luna who can command respect, who has political sway, who can lead. This girl, Elara, she's a ghost in her own skin, and her wolf is as silent as a grave." "Her wolf is not silent, Kyle. It merely waits," Torvin said, his gaze distant, as if seeing beyond the walls of the study. "I felt it. A flicker, an echo of something truly ancient. You will see. Tonight, under the full moon, her true nature will be revealed." Kale stopped pacing, his eyes narrowed. "And if you are wrong, Torvin, if she is just a frightened girl with a weak spirit, what then? You risk everything, the stability of the kingdom, for a feeling." "Some risks must be taken, Kale, when destiny calls," Torvin replied, his voice firm, leaving no room for further argument. "Prepare the courtyard. Ensure the guards are doubled. We anticipate descent." As the moon climbed higher, painting the kingdom in a ghostly silver light, Elara was led through the labyrinthine corridors of the castle. Every shadow seemed to hold a pair of watching eyes, every distant murmur a judgment. She clutched the silver locket at her throat, a small, intricate piece of jewelry that had belonged to her mother, finding a sliver of comfort in its familiar weight. Finally, she stood at the precipice of the grand courtyard, the air thick with the scent of night-blooming jasmine and the collective anticipation of hundreds of wolves. The crowd was a sea of upturned faces, a mix of curious stares, open hostility, and a few scattered expressions of pity. The dais, bathed in the moon's ethereal glow, seemed impossibly far away. King Torvin stood at its center, a formidable figure in his ceremonial furs, his presence radiating an almost palpable power. He met her gaze across the expanse, a silent reassurance passing between them, a thread of connection that momentarily quieted the cacophony of her fears. She took a deep breath, the chill night air filling her lungs. This was it, the moment of truth. She could feel a faint stirring beneath her ribs, a warmth that had not been there moments before. It was a tremor, a pulse, a quiet whisper that promised something more, something vast and untamed. The whispers of the court faded, replaced by the thrumming beat of her own heart and the faint, growing hum of something ancient awakening within her. She stepped forward, her silver gown shimmering, and began her slow, arduous walk towards her destiny. The full moon, a luminous pearl in the velvet sky, seemed to watch, waiting. The approaching full moon. The oppressive weight of the crown, unseen but ever present, pressed down on Alara as she approached the gilded dais. Each step on the plush crimson runner felt like a deliberate act of defiance against the collective sneers of the court. Their murmurs, like a swarm of angry bees, followed her, stinging with whispered insults about her common birth and her silent, unresponsive wolf. Her heart hammered a frantic rhythm against her ribs, a drumbeat of terror that threatened to drown out the faint, almost imperceptible hum she'd felt moments ago. It was a vibration, deep within her bones, a warmth that promised something ancient and powerful, yet remained tantalizingly out of reach. King Torvin's gaze, steady and unwavering, met hers. There was a flicker of something in his eyes, not pity but a profound understanding, a shared burden. He extended a hand, his touch surprisingly gentle as he helped her up the final step. The very air around them crackled with tension. Kyle, Torvin's beta, stood rigid beside the throne, his jaw tight, his eyes darting between Alara and the king with thinly veiled disapproval. He was a stone wall of tradition and duty, and Alara, a commoner, was a chisel, threatening to crack the very foundation of their world. "My king," Kale's voice cut through the strained silence. "With all due respect, the full moon is but 3 nights hence. To present her as Luna, it is an invitation to chaos. The northern clans are already restless. Their envoys speak of ancient bloodlines, of prophecies unfulfilled." Torvin merely inclined his head, his gaze never leaving Alara's. "Prophecies often speak in riddles, Kyle. Sometimes the most unexpected answers are the truest." He turned to the assembled court, his voice usually a booming command, now a resonant melody. "The Luna has been chosen. Her spirit calls to the ancient song of our land. Patience, my people. The full moon will reveal all." Alara felt the weight of his words, the impossible burden he'd placed on her slender shoulders. The hum within her intensified, a low thrumming pulse that seemed to echo Torvin's conviction. It wasn't a wolf she felt, not yet. It was something far older, something that tasted of rich soil and starlight. The next 3 days passed in a blur of forced courtly instruction and isolating stares. Alara was confined to a wing of the palace, ostensibly for her protection, but in truth, a gilded cage. Ladies-in-waiting, chosen for their impeccable lineage and sneering dispositions, tutored her on etiquette, their voices dripping with disdain. They spoke of the proper way a Luna should carry herself, the appropriate way she should address the king, all while subtly reminding her of her unfortunate origins. One afternoon, as she practiced a curtsy in the grand hall, Lady Seraphina, a woman whose beauty was matched only by her icy demeanor, scoffed. "You fumble with even the simplest movements, girl. How do you expect to command a wolf, let alone a kingdom, when your own spirit remains so stubbornly silent?" Alara flinched, the familiar sting of inadequacy burning through her. But then, the hum returned, a defiant thrum. She straightened, her chin lifting fractionally. "Perhaps," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. "Some songs are meant to be heard, not commanded." Serafina merely sneered and swept out. As the third day bled into evening, a palpable anticipation gripped the palace. The sky, a bruised purple, promised a powerful full moon. Ilara stood by her window, gazing at the emerging silver disk. The hum within her was no longer faint. It was a rising crescendo, a vibrant chorus that filled every cell of her being. Her skin tingled, a strange warmth spreading through her veins. Her senses sharpened. She could smell the damp earth far below, hear the frantic scurry of a mouse in the walls, feel the ancient pulse of the castle itself. Kyle found her there, his face etched with a grim determination. "The king insists on this spectacle," he said, his voice clipped. "He believes in you, Ilara, more than I understand." His gaze, usually so hard, softened for a fleeting moment. "Be careful tonight. The court will be watching, waiting for you to falter. But more importantly, the moon will be watching." He paused, then added almost reluctantly, "Whatever happens, know that the king's faith in you is absolute. I hope it is not misplaced." He left her then, his footsteps echoing down the deserted corridor. Ilara turned back to the window. The moon, now a brilliant orb, hung heavy in the sky, casting the world in an ethereal glow. The hum within her reached a fever pitch, threatening to burst. It was a song, ancient and wild, rising to meet the moon's silent call. Her breath hitched. This wasn't just an awakening. This was a transformation. Her destiny, for better or worse, was about to unfold under the unforgiving gaze of the full moon. Lord Valerius's schemes. Lord Valerius's usually tranquil chambers now thrummed with a suppressed, irritable energy. Sunlight, fractured by thick velvet, striped his polished oak desk, illuminating the parchment unfurled upon it. His ring-laden fingers tapped an impatient staccato against the wood. Opposite him, his son Lyra mirrored his father's brooding intensity, perched precariously on an elaborate chair. "The king's folly knows no bounds," Valerius finally articulated, his voice a low, gravelly current. "To select her, a commoner, a girl devoid of even a hint of a wolf." The last words were expelled like venom. Lyra's eyes narrowed in agreement. "The murmurs swell, father. The court perceives this as an affront to tradition, to the very lineages that have buttressed the crown for generations." "Precisely," Valerius affirmed, pushing upright to stalk the room. The silk of his robes whispered with each agitated stride. "This Luna, Ilara, she is a vacuum, an insult, and an opening." He halted before the grand window, his gaze sweeping the sprawling castle grounds, already weaving intricate machinations. Kale, the steadfast Beta, has already articulated his misgivings. He apprehends the peril in her lupine absence. His fidelity to Torvin, while commendable, can be rerouted. Lyra's brow furrowed. "How so? Kyle is unyielding. To sever his loyalty from the king would be akin to distorting steel." "Not sever, my son, merely incline," Valerius corrected, a subtle curve to his lips. "Kyle fears for the realm's stability. He fears for the king's judgment. He fears for our people's security should the Luna prove wanting. These are not flaws, Lyra. These are points of leverage." He turned, his eyes glinting with a calculated luminescence. "We will nurture these anxieties. We will amplify the court's disquiet. We will ensure Ilara's every misstep, her every awkward moment, is magnified and widely disseminated. She must be perceived as an incompetent, even perilous choice, and in doing so, Curl will inevitably gravitate toward a stronger, more conventional candidate, one who embodies the true might of a Luna. Someone like your sister, Seraphina. Lyra's eyes widened marginally. Seraphina? But she is betrothed to Lord Theron of the Silverwood Pack. A trifling impediment, Valerius dismissed with a languid wave. Theron is a simpleton, easily placated. Seraphina possesses all the attributes Torvin should have sought: beauty, pedigree, a formidable wolf, and the reverence of the noble houses. She is the Luna the kingdom merits, and the Luna Kael would naturally champion. His pacing resumed, now slower, more deliberate. We must hasten Ilara's downfall. The full moon approaches swiftly. If she fails to manifest a wolf, or worse, presents a feeble, wretched one, the king's blunder will be incontrovertible. But we cannot leave it to fortune. We must ensure her isolation. We must ensure her lack of preparation. We must ensure that any assistance she might receive is unavailable. How do we orchestrate that? Lyra inquired, a nascent ambition sparking in his own gaze. The guards assigned to her, loyal to the crown, yes, but not necessarily to a commoner Luna, Valerius mused. A few carefully chosen words, a few opportune suggestions of her fragility or unsuitability for the rigours of court life, and their vigilance will wane. Her instruction in courtly behaviour, in history, in a Luna's duties, these can be deferred or mismanaged. She must feel utterly alone, utterly overwhelmed. He paused, a cold, predatory gleam in his eyes. And then, when the full moon arrives and she stands exposed in her inadequacy, Kael will discern the truth. The court will demand a change, and Seraphina, perfectly poised and prepared, will be the obvious, indispensable choice. The king will have no recourse but to rectify his error, and our family, Lyra, will finally ascend to its rightful zenith of power. A knock at the door fractured their plotting. A servant entered, bowing deeply. "My lord, a dispatch from the royal healer. Lady Ilara has requested specific herbs for a recurring malady." Valerius's lips curved into a thin smile. "A recurring malady, you say? How regrettable. Inform the healer that the requisite herbs are presently out of season. A new consignment is anticipated, naturally, but not for several days. Tell him to offer her a calming tisane instead. Something mild, nothing that would fortify her." He dismissed the servant with a casual flick of his wrist. "See Lyra," Valerius remarked, turning back to his son, his eyes gleaming with satisfaction. "Small threads, easily manipulated. The tapestry, my son, will be rewoven in our image." Lyra finally rose, a matching, calculating smile adorning his face. "Indeed, father. The tapestry." The air in the room, thick with schemes, seemed to hum with a quiet, dangerous anticipation. A quiet strength. The library, a sanctuary of hushed whispers and aged parchment, offered Ilara a refuge from courtly barbs. Lord Valerius's disdain, a glacial current flowing through the castle, rarely breached these walls where forgotten lore and ancient secrets offered a different kind of solace. Her fingers traced the faded script of a brittle volume on archaic rituals. Torvin, her unwavering champion, insisted she immerse herself in the Luna's history, in prophecies foretelling a commoner's rise to lead their people. He spoke of an ancient song resonating within her, a melody only he discerned, a destiny she was yet to fully comprehend. Her days blurred into a regimen of lessons, courtly decorum, the intricate ballet of diplomacy, the annals of the Lycanthian kingdom. Each evening she retreated to her chambers, the nascent crown pressing down with a weight far exceeding any physical burden. The court, a hostile sea of disapproving gazes and thinly veiled contempt, made their judgment clear. They saw a timid girl, an ordinary mortal, devoid of lineage or the power of a wolf, an unfit Luna. One particularly arduous afternoon found Alara struggling to master the notoriously complex Lycanthrian waltz under the severe gaze of Lady Isolde, the kingdom's preeminent dance mistress. Isolde, whose very posture commanded a room, tapped her silver-tipped cane with measured impatience. Again, Alara, your steps lack conviction, your bearing, grace. Valerius and Seraphina, ostensibly engrossed in a history lesson nearby, punctuated the air with exaggerated sighs and poorly concealed snickers. Seraphina's effortless pirouettes and flawless turns served as a silent, cutting indictment of Alara's awkward attempts. Perhaps, Valerius drawled, his voice carrying clearly through the open archway, some are simply not born to lead the dance, let alone a kingdom. Seraphina's giggle, sharp as splintering glass, echoed the sentiment. Alara felt a mortifying blush creep up her neck, her steps faltering even more. Isolde, however, remained impassive, her unwavering gaze fixed on Alara. Grace is not always an innate gift, Lord Valerius. Sometimes it is forged through perseverance. Later, in a tranquil corner of the palace gardens, Alara discovered Beta Kyle contemplating a rosebush, his brow furrowed. He cleared his throat. The king. He is quite resolute, Alara. About you. A weighty silence followed, pregnant with unspoken doubt. Many are apprehensive. The Luna must project strength, be a visible force. Without your wolf, it is challenging for some to accept. Alara lowered her gaze to her hands, clenching them subtly. I understand their apprehensions, Beta. I share them. Kyle nodded, his eyes distant. The full moon approaches. That is when a Luna's true power awakens. A leader's wolf, their spirit, manifests fully. He then met her gaze, a fleeting, unreadable expression in his eyes. Do you truly believe you are prepared for what that night demands? The question hung in the air, sharp as a cold blade. Alara swallowed, searching for an answer she wasn't sure she possessed. I trust King Torvin's vision, she finally managed, her voice barely audible. And I am learning. I am striving. Kyle offered a slight, almost imperceptible nod. Striving is commendable, Alara, but the court expects more than mere effort from their Luna. He turned back to the rosebush, his silence amplifying the prevalent skepticism. Yet, amidst the swirling doubts and subtle machinations, Torvin remained her steadfast anchor. He often sought her out in the evenings, finding her amidst the library's towering shelves or within the castle's quiet alcoves. He would sit beside her, his large hand gently encompassing hers. The ancient song, Alara, he would murmur, his gaze intense. It strengthens within you with each passing day. A quiet strength, yes, but a formidable one. Do not let their clamour obscure its melody. One evening, he presented her with a small, intricately carved wooden box. Inside, cradled on crimson velvet, lay a silver crescent moon pendant, its surface gleaming with an internal luminescence. This belonged to my mother, he explained, his voice softer than she had ever heard it. She wore it always. It symbolizes guidance, a beacon in the darkness. Just as you will be, my Luna. Alara's fingers trembled as she touched the cool metal. The magnitude of his trust, the depth of his belief in her, was almost unbearable. It was a silent affirmation, a declaration that despite the world's opposition, he perceived something within her that others missed. A strength not of primal roar or sharpened claw, but of quiet fortitude, a burgeoning inner power poised to unfurl beneath the full moon's gaze. She would not fail him. She could not fail him. The full moon was coming, and with it, her destiny. The moonlit courtyard gathers. The pearlescent orb of the moon commenced its measured ascent, bathing the courtyard in hues of silver and profound indigo. Torches, nervously lit, flickered against ancient stones, their dancing shadows mirroring the anxious murmurs rippling through the assembled court. Tonight marked the full moon, the fated hour when Ilara's true nature, or lack thereof, would be irrevocably laid bare. Ilara stood beside Torvin, her hand clasped firmly in his, though an almost imperceptible tremor betrayed her composure. The silver wolf pendant, etched with archaic runes, lay cool against her skin, a constant, tangible affirmation of Torvin's steadfast faith. Every gaze in the courtyard, from the humblest stable hand to the most revered noble, converged on her, a crushing weight. She could practically taste the collective skepticism, a palpable wave of doubt threatening to engulf her. Lord Valerius, magnificent in emerald velvets, stood with Lady Isolde tucked proprietarily beneath his arm. A barely disguised smirk played on his lips as he caught Ilara's eye. He offered a slight, almost imperceptible bow, dripping with mock deference. "A beautiful night, wouldn't you agree, my king?" he boomed, his voice carrying effortlessly over the hushed crowd. "Perfect for awakenings." His eyes flickered to Ilara, a cold, predatory glint within their depths. Torvin, sensing the barb, tightened his grip on Ilara's hand. "Indeed, Valerius, a night of profound significance." His voice, though calm, possessed an undeniable edge of steel. Kyle, positioned a few paces behind them, shifted his weight. His gaze, typically so direct, was troubled, darting between Ilara and the ascending moon. He respected Torvin, undoubtedly, but the king's unwavering stance on Ilara had begun to fray the edges of that loyalty. He felt the thick tension in the air, the undercurrent of rebellion Valerius so expertly stirred. A beta's allegiance was to the pack, and a Luna incapable of defending herself was an undeniable liability. He observed the whispers, the knowing glances, the barely suppressed snickers from the younger nobles. The king's choice was transforming them into a laughingstock. As the moon climbed higher, its illumination intensified, imbuing the courtyard with an almost otherworldly glow. The air grew heavy, charged with anticipation. Ilara's breath hitched. She sensed something stirring within her, a faint thrumming beneath her ribs, like a captive bird fluttering against a delicate bone cage. It wasn't the raw, feral power she'd imagined a wolf's awakening to be, but a deep, resonant vibration, echoing the ancient chant Torvin spoke of. Suddenly, a piercing shriek shattered the silence. It was Lady Isolde. She pointed a trembling finger at Ilara, her face a mask of feigned terror. "Look!" she cried, her voice high-pitched and frantic. "Her eyes! They're changing!" A ripple of fear, or perhaps carefully orchestrated panic, swept through a portion of the crowd. Ilara, startled, instinctively sought Torvin's gaze. He met her eyes, unwavering, filled with a deep, unshakable calm that soothed her frayed nerves. She blinked, and the thrumming intensified, a warmth spreading from her chest to her fingertips. Valerius seized the opportune moment. "My king!" he declared, stepping forward, his voice resonating with false concern. "Perhaps it is unwise to subject our future Luna to such public scrutiny. Should her wolf truly be emergent, the strain could prove too great. For her, and for the stability of the court." His implication hung heavy. Her wolf would not emerge, and her failure would destabilize everything. Torvin's eyes narrowed, yet his voice remained level. "Ilara is strong, Valerius, stronger than many acknowledge." He turned to Kale. "Beta, ensure order is maintained. Any disturbance will not be tolerated." Kyle nodded, his jaw tight. He moved to the edge of the assembly, his presence a silent warning to any who might challenge the king directly. Yet, his own doubts gnawed at him. He saw no glimmer of power in Alara's eyes, no hint of the raw, primal energy that accompanied a true wolf's awakening. Only a fragile, ethereal glow that seemed more born of fear than latent strength. The moon reached its zenith, poised directly overhead. Its light was almost blinding, a pure, silver deluge. Alara felt the thrumming within her intensify, becoming a deep, low hum that vibrated through her very bones. It was no physical transformation, no sudden burst of fur or claw, but something far more profound. It was a song, ancient and primal, echoing from the depths of her being. It resonated with the moon, with the very earth beneath her feet. A gasp escaped her lips, not of pain, but of astonishment. The pendant against her chest grew warm, then hot, radiating an almost visible aura. The silver wolf etched upon it seemed to awaken, its eyes glowing with a faint, internal luminescence. The courtyard held its collective breath, suspended in the moon's silent embrace, awaiting the revelation. The light and the shadow. The silver light of the full moon poured through the arched windows of the grand hall, bathing Alara in its ethereal glow. Her wolf pendant pulsed with a soft, internal luminescence, mirroring the rhythm of the ancient song that now thrummed through her veins. It wasn't a physical change, not yet, but a profound shift within her very essence. She felt connected to something primal, eternal, a power far older than the kingdom itself. Yet, to the eyes of the court, she remained simply Alara, a commoner, standing motionless as the critical moment of her supposed transformation passed. A collective murmur rippled through the assembled nobles, thick with disappointment and barely concealed disdain. Lord Valerius's sneer was a sharp blade in the silence. "It appears," he declared, his voice cutting through the hushed hall, "the moon has judged our Luna, and found her wanting." Kyle, the beta, shifted uneasily beside Torvin. His brow was furrowed, his gaze flicking between Alara's still form and the king's resolute face. "Torvin," he began, his voice low, "there is no change, no scent of wolf, no shift in her eyes. The prophecy speaks of a clear revelation." Torvin merely tightened his grip on the hilt of his sword, his gaze fixed on Alara. He saw what others could not. The subtle tremor in her hands, the almost imperceptible deepening of her breath, the faint, almost unheard melody that seemed to emanate from her. "The ancient song has begun," he stated, his voice ringing with absolute conviction. "Her transformation is not of the flesh alone." Valerius scoffed, a dry, dismissive sound. "Ancient song. King Torvin, are we to believe our Luna sings a lullaby to the moon instead of revealing her true form? This is not the power a kingdom needs, nor the Luna it deserves." He turned to the court, his voice gaining volume, weaving a tapestry of doubt. "A Luna must be a beacon of strength, a protector. What protection does a girl who merely feels things offer against our enemies?" Alara felt the weight of their scrutiny, the icy tendrils of their skepticism wrapping around her. She could hear their whispers, their judgment, the very air vibrating with their disbelief. Yet the song within her did not falter. It grew stronger, a warm, resonant hum that offered a strange, comforting counterpoint to the court's hostility. It was a melody of earth and sky, of ancient forests and flowing rivers, a symphony of existence itself. Torvin stepped forward, placing himself between Alara and the disapproving eyes of the court. "Her power is not one you understand, Valerius. It is a power of connection, of life itself." He looked directly at Kale, whose doubt was palpable. "Have faith, Beta." The ancient prophecies spoke of a Luna unlike any before. A Luna who would awaken the lost song. Kyle, torn between his loyalty to Torvin and the stark reality of Alara's apparent lack of transformation, remained silent, his jaw tight. He respected Torvin immensely, but his wolf instincts, sharp and undeniable, sensed no other wolf in Alara, only a fragile human. Just then, a faint, almost imperceptible flicker of light emanated from Alara's chest, where the pendant rested. It was a brief, inward pulse, like a heartbeat of pure moonlight. Valerius, engrossed in his verbal attack, missed it. But Torvin saw. Kyle, too, caught the fleeting glimmer, his eyes widening slightly. "You speak of ancient prophecies, King Torvin?" Valerius pressed on, oblivious. "But what I see is a queen without a crown, a Luna without a wolf. My daughter Seraphina carries the purest lineage, the strongest wolf blood. She is what this kingdom truly needs." He gestured towards Seraphina, who stood proudly, her chin high, a picture of aristocratic grace. The song within Alara surged, not in anger but in a profound sense of recognition. It was a song of balance, of opposing forces. She felt the weight of Valerius's ambition, the cold calculations of his power grab, like a shadow attempting to extinguish the light within her. But the light, the song, held firm. It wasn't about a physical display of power. It was about an inner strength, a quiet resilience that mirrored the enduring spirit of the earth itself. Torvin turned to Valerius, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You forget your place, Lord, and you underestimate the moon's wisdom." His gaze swept over the court, daring anyone else to voice their dissent. The moon's revelation is not always what we expect. True power often hides in plain sight, awaiting the right moment to unfurl. He then turned back to Alara, a silent message of unwavering belief passing between them. The full moon was still high, its light pouring over her, and the song within her continued its silent, powerful crescendo. The true test, Torvin knew, was yet to come. The dragon's roar. The throne room's oppressive hush fractured with a guttural snarl, alien to Alara's gentle nature. It was Torvin's, a sound rarely unleashed, least of all at another alpha, and certainly never at a beta. Valerius, caught off guard, visibly recoiled. The king's eyes, typically tranquil pools of amber, now blazed with an annihilating fury. "You dare!" Torvin began, his voice a dangerous baritone that resonated through the very stone. "Challenge my authority. Question my Luna, in my own court." Valerius, recovering his poise, smoothed his silk tunic. "My king," he purred, a thin veneer of deference coating his tone. "I merely echo the concerns of your loyal subjects. The moon goddess demands a true Luna, a she-wolf of formidable power, not a commoner who shrinks from her own destiny." He waved a dismissive hand towards Alara, who stood pale yet unyielding beside Torvin. A collective intake of breath rippled through the assembly, followed by a rising murmur. Kyle, rigid to Torvin's left, subtly shifted his stance, his gaze flitting between Valerius and Alara, a familiar uncertainty clouding his eyes. He knew Torvin's wrath intimately from training, but this was different. Elemental. Absolute. Torvin advanced, each deliberate step echoing like distant thunder. "Her destiny," he snarled, his voice escalating, "is not for you to interpret, Valerius. The goddess has spoken, and if her wisdom eludes you, perhaps this court is no longer your place." A flicker of fear warred with Valerius's ingrained arrogance, contorting his features. "My king, I have served the crown for decades. My lineage is impeccable, my loyalty unquestionable. I offer you a true Luna, a daughter of our kind, her wolf howling with inherent strength." He indicated Seraphina, who now stood proudly by his side, her silver wolf pendant glinting. Ilara felt an unfamiliar tremor within her. Not fear of Valerius, but a nascent stirring in her core, a warmth radiating from her chest. The pendant, a constant weight, now felt strangely alive, humming with a low, vibrant energy. Her gaze locked on Torvin, on his unwavering conviction, and for the first time, a spark of defiance ignited within her. She was no shrinking commoner. She was his Luna. Torvin's gaze snapped back to Valerius. "And I tell you, Lord Valerius, Ilara is my Luna. Her power transcends your understanding. To challenge her is to challenge me." He clenched his fists, knuckles stark white. "I will tolerate neither insolence nor dissent. My word is law, and my Luna is chosen by the goddess herself." The air crackled with palpable tension. Valerius seemed to diminish under Torvin's onslaught, his carefully constructed composure finally crumbling. He swallowed hard, his eyes darting around the room, seeking absent support. The assembled lords and ladies, witnessing their king's raw power, had receded into themselves, their faces masks of apprehension. None dared meet Torvin's fiery gaze. Yet Cale stepped forward. "My king," he began, his voice hesitant. Perhaps Lord Valerius means no disrespect. He simply struggles to comprehend. We all do. His eyes briefly met Ilara's, a blend of doubt and genuine confusion in their depths. Her transformation was unexpected, unseen. Torvin turned his blazing eyes to Kyle. "You too, Beta?" he questioned, his voice dangerously soft. "You who stood beside me, who swore fealty to my chosen Luna, now echo the doubts of a fool." Kyle winced visibly, shoulders slumping. "No, my king," he quickly amended, his voice firming. "My loyalty is absolute. I merely seek to bridge the gap, to help the court grasp this new path. Ilara's power, if it is truly within her, remains a mystery to us all." Ilara, feeling the pulsating warmth intensify, stepped forward, placing a gentle hand on Torvin's arm. Her touch, though light, seemed to anchor him, his fiery aura dimming slightly. She met Kyle's gaze directly. "Beta Kyle is right," she stated, her voice clear and surprisingly steady, cutting through the heavy silence. "My power is not what you anticipate, but it is real." Her simple words, imbued with unshakable conviction, momentarily disarmed the court. Valerius stared, mouth slightly agape. Torvin, his anger still simmering, looked at her with renewed pride. He squeezed her hand, a silent affirmation. "Indeed," Torvin declared, his voice now lower, more controlled, yet no less formidable. Her transformation was not of flesh, but of spirit. The ancient song, "The power of our lineage," resonates within her. It is a gift, not a failing. He glanced pointedly at Valerius. "And those who question the goddess's gift, or my judgment, will answer directly to me." The implication hung heavy. Valerius finally bowed, a stiff, grudging movement. "Forgive me, my king," he mumbled, his voice stripped of its earlier confidence. "I misspoke. I shall endeavour to understand." His eyes, however, still held a dangerous glint, promising future machinations. Torvin merely grunted, a sound of dismissal. "See that you do, Lord Valerius, for the consequences of your continued misunderstanding will be severe." He then turned, his arm protectively around Ilara, addressing the stunned court. "Let this be known. Ilara is my Luna, and her power will in time become evident to all. Now, the ceremony is concluded. You are dismissed." As the court began to shuffle out, a palpable sense of unease lingered. Ilara felt the warmth within her slowly subside, leaving behind a faint hum and a strange exhilaration. She had faced them, and with Torvin at her side, she had not wavered. The dragon, she realized, was Torvin's roar, protecting her. but a different kind of fire. A quieter, deeper one had been kindled within herself. A dangerous choice revealed. The oppressive silence in the throne room was a living thing, heavy with unspoken accusations and seething resentment. Valerius, though momentarily silenced by Torvin's glacial warning, refused to be cowed. His eyes, like chips of flint, darted to Alara, then back to the king. "With all due respect, your majesty," he began, his voice dripping with an oily politeness that did little to mask the venom beneath. "Aluna is the bedrock of our kingdom. She embodies our strength, our lineage, our very future. To choose, untraditionally, is to invite chaos." Alara felt the weight of his words like a physical blow. The nascent power that had stirred within her, a whisper of something ancient and wild, seemed to recede, replaced by the familiar gnaw of inadequacy. She was still just Ilara, the commoner, the girl who had spent her life tending herbs, not navigating the treacherous currents of court politics. Her gaze flickered to Torvin, seeking reassurance, and found it in the unwavering resolve etched on his features. He was a mountain, unyielding against the storm. "Chaos, Lord Valerius," Torvin's voice rumbled, a low growl that vibrated through the stone walls, "is born not from choice, but from defiance. My choice is made, my Luna is chosen, and her strength, I assure you, will prove itself in ways you cannot yet comprehend." He turned his back on Valerius, a deliberate dismissal that stung the nobleman more than any outright insult. "Kyle, a word." Beta Kyle, who had been observing the exchange with a rigid neutrality, stepped forward. His expression was unreadable, a carefully constructed mask. Alara wondered if he too harboured doubts, if his loyalty to Torvin was warring with his ingrained reverence for tradition. "Your Majesty," Karl acknowledged, his voice deep and calm. Torvin lowered his voice, though Alara, standing close, still caught the hushed intensity. "The Northern Patrols report increased rogue activity near the border. I want you to personally oversee the strengthening of our defences, and while you're there, investigate the whispers of the ancient markers." Kyle's brow furrowed almost imperceptibly. "The markers, Your Majesty. They haven't been active in centuries." "Precisely," Torvin replied, his gaze briefly meeting Alara's. A flicker of something, recognition perhaps, passed between them. "But ancient things awaken when the time is right. Keep your eyes open, Kale, and your mind." As Kale bowed and departed, a subtle unease settled over Alara. Ancient markers, rogue activity. It was clear Torvin's concerns extended far beyond the immediate challenge to her legitimacy. There was a deeper current running beneath the surface of the kingdom, one she was only just beginning to perceive. Later that evening, the grand dining hall, usually a boisterous symphony of conversation and clinking silverware, was subdued. Courtiers whispered behind cupped hands, their glances darting to Alara at the king's side. The food, rich and fragrant, tasted like ash in her mouth. She felt like an exhibit, a curiosity on display. Torvin, sensing her discomfort, reached under the table and gently squeezed her hand. The simple gesture was a lifeline, grounding her in the swirling sea of unfamiliarity. "They question your worth, my Luna," Torvin murmured, his voice barely audible above the hushed hum of the room, "because they fear what they don't understand. But fear is a weak foundation for judgment." Alara looked at him, truly looked at him. His faith in her, unshakable and absolute, was a balm to her wounded spirit. "And you, Torvin?" she asked, her voice a fragile whisper. "Do you understand?" A faint smile touched his lips, a rare softening of his formidable features. "I hear the ancient song, Alara, and it sings of you." He paused, his gaze thoughtful. "But perhaps it's time we helped them understand. We will tour the northern territories, see the people, understand their needs. Let them see you, not as a symbol of defiance, but as a future." The prospect of facing the wider kingdom filled Ilara with a fresh wave of trepidation. The court had been difficult enough. The common people, however, were a different beast. Their expectations, their traditions, would be even more deeply ingrained. Yet, as she looked at Torvin, she realized that to shrink from this challenge would be to betray his unwavering belief in her. The nascent power within her, which had retreated under Valerius's scorn, now stirred again, a faint warmth spreading through her veins. It wasn't a roar, not yet, but a persistent hum, a quiet insistence that she was more than she seemed. The dangerous choice Torvin had made was not just for him, but for her, and now she had to rise to meet it. The journey north would be her proving ground, a crucible for the quiet strength that Torvin believed resided within her. The legend begins. The crisp morning air of the northern reach bit at Ilara's cheeks, a stark contrast to the humid warmth of the capital. She clutched the thick wool cloak Torvin had insisted upon, its dark fabric smelling faintly of pine and his own musky scent. The royal caravan, an impressive procession of armoured guards, supply wagons, and Torvin's personal retinue, snaked through a landscape still clinging to the last vestiges of autumn. Bare branches clawed at a bruised sky, and the distant peaks wore a dusting of fresh snow. Ilara rode in a gilded carriage, its interior surprisingly comfortable despite the bumpy terrain. Torvin, however, preferred to be at the head of the column, astride his formidable black warhorse, a silent, imposing figure. She could feel his presence, a steady thrumming beneath her skin, a constant reassurance amidst the unfamiliar sights and sounds. Her anxiety, a persistent companion since the pronouncement, had intensified with each passing mile. The purpose of this journey, to introduce her as Luna, felt like a grand performance for which she had no script. She practiced her smile in the polished silver of a travel mirror, finding it thin and uncertain. Her dormant wolf remained a silent mystery, a whisper rather than a roar, and the thought of facing the scrutinizing eyes of the northern packs without its manifest power made her stomach clench. "You seem preoccupied, Luna," a voice observed from the opposite seat. Lady Isolde, Torvin's elder sister, a woman of sharp intelligence and even sharper wit, regarded her with an appraising gaze. Isolde, with her striking silver hair and piercing blue eyes, had been a surprising ally, offering quiet support in the tumultuous days following the selection. "Just contemplating the journey," Ilara replied, trying to project an air of calm she didn't possess. Isolde's lips curved into a knowing smile. "The northern reach is different, harder. They will demand more than a pretty face and a king's favour. They'll want to see the wolf." Ilara's breath hitched. "And if they don't?" Isolde leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Then Torvin will stand alone in his conviction. And you, Ilara, will have to find another way to earn their respect. Or risk losing it, and much else besides." The weight of Isolde's words settled heavy upon Ilara. It wasn't a threat, but a statement of brutal truth. Their first stop was the fortified village of Oakhaven, nestled in a valley carved by a swift-flowing river. The villagers, mostly hardy hunters and trappers, lined the dirt path leading to the central hall. Their faces were etched with curiosity, skepticism, and a hint of resentment. Ilara felt their eyes on her, dissecting her every move. She saw their whispers, their assessing glances exchanged behind cupped hands. Torvin dismounted with practiced grace, his imposing figure dwarfing the headman who rushed to greet him. He spoke in a deep, resonant voice that carried across the square, introducing Ilara as his Luna. He spoke of unity, of strength, and of the ancient prophecy that bound them. Ilara, standing beside him, felt a strange surge of energy, a tingling in her fingertips, But no outward change. Her wolf remained stubbornly hidden. She tried to meet the villagers' gazes, offering hesitant smiles, but they often turned away, their expressions unreadable. A small child, no older than 5, clutching a wooden toy wolf, stared at her with wide, innocent eyes, then pointed a tiny finger. "She's not a wolf," the child declared loudly, her voice cutting through the strained silence. A ripple of suppressed chuckles went through the crowd. Ilara's cheeks flushed scarlet. Torvin's hand, resting lightly on the small of her back, tightened almost imperceptibly. Later that evening, within the stone walls of the village's communal hall, Torvin sat with the elders, discussing the increasing rogue activity in the surrounding forests. Ilara, seated beside him, listened intently. The elders spoke of unsettling omens, of ancient markers glowing with an eerie light, and of a palpable fear that had settled over the land. Beta Kale is investigating further north, Torvin assured them, his voice calm despite the gravity of the reports. He will report directly to me. Ilara felt a flicker of apprehension. The ancient markers and the unsettling omens resonated with Torvin's earlier pronouncements about her own unique destiny. Was her dormant wolf somehow connected to these strange occurrences? After the formal discussions, a young woman, no older than Ilara, approached her. Her name was Lyra, and she was the village healer. Her eyes, the color of moss after rain, held a surprising depth. "I heard the child's words earlier," Lyra said softly, her voice barely a whisper. "Do not let them wound you, Luna. Some truths are not meant to be seen with the eye, but felt with the heart." Ilara met her gaze, a spark of connection forming. "You believe me?" Lyra offered a gentle smile. "My grandmother used to speak of an ancient song, one that resonates not with claws and fangs, but with the very essence of the land. She said it would be sung by one who held the key to our future, one whose power lay hidden, waiting for the right moment to awaken." Lyra paused, her gaze sweeping over Ilara's face. "Perhaps you are that song, Luna. Perhaps your legend has yet to begin." Ilara felt a strange warmth spread through her chest. Lyra's words, so different from the court's skepticism or Isolde's pragmatic advice, resonated with a deeper part of her. It was a seed of hope, planted in the fertile ground of an ancient prophecy. As she lay in the small, comfortable bed later that night, the wind howling outside the window, she thought of Lyra's words, of the ancient song, and a new resolve began to take root within her. She might not have a wolf that roared, but perhaps she had a song that hummed, waiting to be heard. The legend, as Lyra suggested, was still unwritten, and Ilara, for the first time, felt a flicker of desire to be its author.